So I think there's something wrong with all of the class picking guides out there. My first problem is specificity. It's not helpful to rank the classes without considering their subclasses. You can't take a class without taking a subclass, and most people, when they're selecting a class, want to think about what that subclass decision is going to be. But all the subclass ranking videos either compare them against each other as if you've already chosen your class, or they just rank them from S to F. And that's my other problem. D&D is not a one-dimensional game. There are a lot of different facets to D&D and a lot of different roles you might want to fill in your party. So it's not helpful to just say a binary, good or bad, and then break that up into 5 tiers. You want to know good or bad at what. The Dungeon Dudes did a great job analyzing these roles. You can check out their video there. And they do talk about the classes in general and how they fit in those roles. See problem 1. So if you are a new player looking to create a character and you have a role or multiple roles in mind, there is no one out there who can tell you definitively across all the subclasses which ones are the best for that role. This is partly because it's a lot of work, but luckily I'm on vacation and I have ranked all 113 subclasses for all the classes against each of the 7 roles identified by the Dungeon Dudes. But that's not all, because Wizards of the Coast is working on the next iteration of the game, Tangent, but you can't call it 5th edition also. What is the point of names if 2 different things have the same name? Like, come on, I'm gonna call it 5.5, all right? And until we figure out what we're doing as a community, because we gotta tell them it's not gonna work the other way around. What are you gonna call it? Sound off in the comments. Anyway, because they are working on the next iteration of the game, this may be the first and only series that can comprehensively say that we are covering all of the 5th edition classes and subclasses for these roles. So welcome to the comprehensive class ranking video series.
Hello and welcome
So
back to
how am I going to do this? Here's my methodology. I'm only going to go from rank D to rank S. Those are the levels that made sense to me. I don't think that there's any class or subclass combination that cannot even attempt to fill one of these 7 roles. How you build it is largely up to you, and there are going to be kind of ridiculous edge cases for even the most lost cause of subclass role combinations. But generally, a D tier ranking indicates that the subclass directly detracts or competes against the role you're trying to fill. One good example is like the Paladin with the Infiltrator role. Conquest Paladins are already multiple ability score dependent. They can't afford to pump up their dexterity, and they're encouraged to wear heavy armor, which gives them disadvantage on stealth checks. They have no natural access to things like Find Familiar or the Invisibility spell. They don't even get a lot of illusion or disguise spells on their spell list. There's not only nothing good helping them to fill that role, but there are some things that are actively detracting or that you would have to give up in order to fill that role. D class. I give very few D tier rankings in this series. Honestly, less than 10% of these rankings are D. If you see D tier, I am highly encouraging you not to even try it. In C tier, this is the largest tier by far. These are the class subclass combinations that essentially do nothing for you when you're trying to fill that role. You can build the subclass into that role if you stretch it, but you're just not getting any support from the class features or the subclass features. An Evoker Wizard can max their charisma score and take persuasion proficiency and try to be a good negotiator. You can do that, but there's just nothing that is benefiting you about your class and subclass selection. C tier. In B tier, you are getting some mild support. There may be even enough that, like, with a thoughtful build, you can do a great job in the role that you've selected. Some examples are like, if you have access to spellcasting, maybe some spells on your class spell list are helpful to this effect. There are a couple class features that you could use for this given purpose. And maybe some like good versatility options that you can just kind of like direction into the role that you want to do. This is also a really large category. In A tier, you just have good fits. These are classes that are well suited to the role. They have support for what you're trying to do. If an A tier support character shows up and says, I'm the only support in the party, you're generally pretty happy with that. If you see an A ranking for the class and subclass that you're considering for the role that you want, take it, run with it, don't look back. You're good. S tier is for the best of the best. These are the combinations that are not only good for the role, but are notoriously excelling in the role, setting the standard for that given role in the party. These were the builds that would take intentional sabotage on your part to fail at the task that you have assigned them. I don't hand out very many of these, maybe about 2 per role on average, the smallest category. If those are sort of the rows of my decision matrix, the columns are the 7 different roles. You can check out that Dungeon Dudes video, but here's a quick recap of each of their categories and how I am judging them. Frontliner. This needs a lot of survivability, either through armor class, saving throws, or just plain old lots of hit points. They generally need to be melee in order to capture enemies' focus, and they get an automatic A or higher ranking if they have an ability that kind of locks down enemies or like incentivizes them to attack you. This is the tank of the party. The beatdown is your damage dealing role. This is an extremely vital part of combat, and combat is an extremely vital part of Dungeons & Dragons. So I think this role gets the most attention of any of the 7 roles. Damage dealers might be more focused on a single target, like rundown damage. They might be more AoE or multi-target damage. Rather than just kind of shrugging my shoulders and saying like, it depends on your DM and your table, I'm just going to assume that your campaign will have varying scenarios in combat in which any one of these strategies can have moments to shine. I'm going to evaluate them all evenly. Infiltrator Explorer, this is all about gathering information or disrupting the enemy in a non-combat setting. So one big option here obviously is to have a very high stealth score and kind of stealth in. You can also do this with access to invisibility or maybe good illusion spells. But you can also disguise yourself, talk your way in with deception. There's a lot of different options for this particular role. Your Investigator is also an information gathering role, but this has much more to do with analyzing what's around you, picking up on clues or details in the environment. A good intelligence build is great for investigation checks. A good wisdom modifier will also give you good perception and insight checks. Very helpful here. But you can also kind of use divination magic to kind of get a shortcut to some of the knowledge that you're looking for. The Infiltrator and the Investigator would be a good like dual role build to create, but I am going to evaluate them separately. Support. I think you have some sense of what's going on here. The support doesn't necessarily do well on their own, but they help the rest of the party do way better than they could have otherwise. This absolutely includes healing, but it's more than that. It can include buff spells, auras, condition removal, damage increases, and a good support doesn't excel in just one of these categories, but actually covers many of them. Negotiator. This is the face of the party. This is the one who is negotiating with the NPCs. They're trying to make alliances, extract favors, try to avoid conflict so that you guys save on resources when you don't have to fight people. Or maybe they just act as the money handler for the party. Money is a pretty great persuasion tool, after all. This role is about more than just charisma and the persuasion and deception skill. But I'm going to be honest, if you're very good at the persuasion deception skill, you're going to get an A for this role. It's a big chunk of this. And then utility. This is just a catch-all category. I like to think of this as access to solutions to unique problems. So this category might include solutions for environmental hazards or some mobility, teleportation, aid with handling lesser known features like encumbrance or travel speed, or niche solutions like specialty abilities for fiends or undead or aberrations. It might include battlefield control, lockdown, crowd control features. It's essentially everything else, right? I want to be clear that the audience for this series is not optimizers. If you have a very specific build, which combines a lot of levels and a lot of different features and multi-classing, and it gets a great result at the end with one of the lower ranked classes, great, that's a fun exercise, I love doing that too, but it's not necessarily very helpful for your general player who is just looking for a gut check on whether these two things mesh well. Now, one obstacle here is time. I need to make about 800 evaluations in total, which even if I took 1 minute per ranking, would last over 13 hours of video. So that's an overwhelming amount of time. So here's my plan. In the next video, I'm going to establish a baseline for each class. That's how each class fits into each role without any of the subclass features in consideration. This will act like a floor on the ranking, and then I'm only needing to evaluate the subclass features for whether they add to that or not. And that'll be the bulk of the series. In addition, to even further limit my scope, I'm going to pay special attention to the features below level 10. This is because, of course, most campaigns don't reach a very high level, but also because if you are filling a role in a party, you kind of need to do so immediately when you start playing. Waiting for a level 14 feature to be the party's frontliner just doesn't work. So I will look at those higher level features, but I weight earlier features as much more impactful. Also, not considering multi-classing, that's just impossible. There are way too many combinations for any one person to analyze. It's just out of scope. I hope this is the kind of content that you're interested in. Lots of upcoming videos on this subject, and I do expect a recap video where I talk about some of the lessons learned, some of the insights, and kind of the fun surprises that came out of this exercise for me. Thanks, guys, and subscribe to get more of these.